Hello and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm working on watercolor and I'm showing 4 different paintings that I do with my students. The first one is a color wheel that I do with my 2nd and 3rd grade students, and the other ones are 2 color paintings that I do with this year my kindergarten and 1st grade students. So this is the color wheel, and the first time I tried painting a color wheel with my 2nd and 3rd graders, I had them draw it in pencil first, but it ended up being really difficult for them. They were upset about not getting it perfect. They wanted erasers before they even had anything to erase, and it was kind of a headache. So I decided to have them draw it with the water instead of with the pencil, and that worked actually a lot better. Not only were they less anxious about it, but they also drew better circles, which I was surprised by. So we've been doing that ever since for about 12 classes, and it's been going really well for the wheel shape too. And with the yellow on top, I usually tell them to make a rainbow shape, and they all know what a rainbow shape is. So they've been doing a really good job of both the circle and the rainbow shape. This one uses magenta, and I have been using magenta for my primary watercolor red for several years. A few years ago I did some research into kind of the history of magenta and why some color schemes use it and some don't, and printer ink, if you've ever heard of CMYK color scheme for printing things out on computer, that's cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And my watercolors use pretty much those colors. Instead of cyan, it's phthalo blue, which is that color that you see. It's a very bright, strong blue. And then the magenta, which I got this one from Blick, and it's a little tube paint that I've been watering down. It smells kind of weird, but it does make a really beautiful purple and pink, which we otherwise wouldn't have with the 3 primaries. And then just a regular yellow. Yellow's funny because the blue and the reds, you always have to choose warm shade or cool shade, but yellow you don't really. So there's not too much to look into there. And then these ones make not such a strong orange, although I kind of like the orange. It's really kind of sunsetty, or like an orange sorbet or something. I think it's really pretty with that pink tone in it. And then the blue is phthalo blue green tone, and it makes a really pretty green, I think. And then the purple is also really pretty with this set. So those are the colors that we've been using. And the kids' main thing that's a little bit challenging for them is not wanting to blend those yellows, purples, and greens for very long. They are very wide of an area. They tend to make a really, really skinny strip so that it's mostly primary with a little strip in between. And I have to keep coming up to them and saying, no, you need more purple, you need more green, overlap them a little bit more. And then this version of the color wheel that we've been making, we're blending brown in the middle. Most of them have been able to blend brown. Some of them have been blending some gray in there. And that's one of the most frequently asked color mixing questions that I get is, how do I make brown? So since the colors aren't the same kind of strength or weight, I always have to say something like, you use mostly yellow, some red, little tiny bit of blue. Otherwise they'll get purple. This next painting is going to be yellow magenta with black ink, and it's a demo that I did for a half-page watercolor. This is 5 by 7 inches, I believe, and it starts out with painting just water. I really like very flowy watercolors, and even though I'm using liquid watercolors that are already watered down, I add water first also in order to get that effect where it really spreads out as soon as you put it in, that wet onto wet effect. That's one of the things that I like about watercolors in general. This is not my main medium that I work in myself for fun, but I do like some things about it, and one of those is that wet into wet. That one I was showing, you can take the handle of the paintbrush or something kind of pokey, and you can make those branches that kind of stick out. It can be spiky or be kind of branchy, something like that. And this one is a tube of yellow paint that I've watered down, and then I've put into these little jars. Everyone gets to share a little jar of the wet paint. Previously, I had put them all onto little palettes. Each person gets their own little palette, and I found that even though we painted the water first, students were still painting much too dry. Like they weren't used to being able to use the water as the medium, and I kept having to try to remind them over and over again. And a few years ago, I was looking into Waldorf teaching, where they do teach a lot of watercolors, and especially in the lower grades, there are a lot of really abstract watercolors where they're telling a story as the students work. A story usually about the colors themselves. It'll be a story about, if it was a palette like this, it would be a story about yellow and about pink and about maybe they would be friends or something. And they said that they used glass jars for their watercolors, and I'm not quite as brave as some of the Waldorf teachers who let them keep maybe 3 or even up to 6 jars of paint on the table at the same time. I bought these little jars and I really like them. They look like little inkwells, which I think is very fun, and the kids like them too. They were saying stuff about them, about how cute they were when I first gave them out. But I actually, for the younger grades, I take their little jars and I switch them out. So I'll give them yellow, and then they'll paint with yellow for 5 minutes or so. And then I will take their yellow and replace it with magenta, and then they'll paint with the magenta. I always go from the lighter, weaker colors to the darker, stronger colors, which I think is usual for watercolor. This is the black ink, and I thought it was pretty cool, but some of the students thought it was cool, and some weren't quite sure about it, that this is strong black ink. It's like India ink, and it spreads out. If you just have a wet spot and you dip your paintbrush in it, then it spreads out. And also the magenta makes little clots, granulation it's called, which I think looks really cool. I think it's a fun technique to use. Some of the students had that happen, and they had kind of like venom spreading out with the little black being dropped into the wet paint. And then some of them decided to paint on dry parts, and then it looks more calligraphic. It looks more like you would get in more of a traditional ink. The second painting is in magenta and blue, and I also added some white and silver tempera. These colors are very strong, and they often tend to get quite dark. And if you aren't very familiar with watercolor, like the children aren't, then it's easy to let it get too dark, which is hard to deal with. A lot of painters would just maybe start a new one if they found that it was getting that way, or be able to plan ahead for it. But since the children are only doing this in one one session and they're only making one painting like this, I give them that white and silver at the end to be able to put in. A lot of them did like a moon or clouds or something that's a little bit lighter. This last painting is in yellow and blue, and it's been the end of November as we've started working on it, and we're going to be working on it through about the second week in December. So this one's going to be wreath themed. It's a little bit less abstract than the first two. For the first one, I had taught the students the word abstract and asked them to paint abstractly. And then for the second one, it was night sky themed. Everyone really likes being able to flick some paint, especially with that white that isn't staining. And then for this third one, we're painting kind of more trees and tree branches and that kind of look, so it's a little bit less abstract. I've been looking up into lately a style of art teaching and art integrating teaching called Reggio Emilio, because one of my colleagues had been looking into it as well, and it's a little bit more kind of experimental. Waldorf is very calm and it makes really beautiful washes and beautiful colors, and it's into kind of exploring the color combinations, whereas from what I understand it, looking it up so far, Reggio is more about the students learning how to express themselves and experimenting and experiencing different materials and seeing what they want to say with it. And I've been leaning a little bit more into that experimental kind of feeling with these paintings, where they have kind of more dripping and more of that granulation. And in this one, I'm using the granulation medium. I haven't quite figured it out yet. There's an artist, I've been reading a book by her who works in this experimental watercolor, Anne Blockley, and she really likes granulation, so she chooses watercolors that those types of watercolors granulate more, like the magenta did. And then also she uses something called granulation medium that will make most watercolors have that effect rather than salt. I tried salt before. She uses salt as well, but I tried salt before with the students and it didn't really work out. Everything just smelled like salt. They couldn't help themselves. They used up the whole salt shaker on even just 1 table's worth of paintings. I told them a lot of times, make sure that you're being careful with the salt, only shake it once and shake it into a puddle, and it just did not connect. So I've been trying out the granulation medium, and I might use it with the students in the future. I haven't quite decided how to do that yet. As I mentioned earlier when I was working on the color wheel, I really like with this blue, this is the phthalo blue again, the greens that it makes, and I think this makes a really, really pretty green. I like that look with the turquoise and the yellow, and I'm adding to this one as well black liquid watercolor instead of the ink. On the other one, you could kind of see how if you put the black ink into the wet watercolor, it looks really cool. It's a really distinctive technique. But it's not very easy to control. It can really take over very, very fast. Whereas with this painting, I'm using Blick liquid watercolor in black, and it's easier to control, which I like for some things, and then for other things, I like that wild, veiny ink look. It seems like each one has its place, and it's worth thinking about which one to use for any given project. That is all for today, and thank you for coming and watching my video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you.